Again, welcome everyone. My name is Alexa Metallic. I am Mi'kmaq from the Stoeppler Mi'kmaq First Nation, which is in Gespegawagi Mi'kmaqi territory. Gespegawagi loosely translates to meaning the last land. I'm the research and policy manager at Indigenous Climate Action, and I'll be hosting today's conversation. This is the first of three sessions on our Organizing Climate Future Speaker series. We're co-hosting this session alongside Research for the Frontlines and UVic's Transformative Action program. Together, in this first session, we're bringing Indigenous organizers and land defenders into conversation to share knowledge grounded in real on-the-ground experience, knowledge that's often overlooked or excluded from mainstream climate spaces. To ground our time together, we're honored to have Jacob Crane here to do an opening for us. So with that, I'll pass it off to you, Jacob.
See you, Gus. Thank you, Alexis. My name's Jacob Crane. My dada is a Jacob Crane. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm just gonna open up with my song really quickly, and then I'll turn it back over to you folks. So we're really happy to be able to share this with you all. So thank you. Yeah, 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 oh, hey, oh, yeah, la, yeah, la, yeah, la, oh, hey, oh, hey, ah, ha, yeah, oh, ho, hey, ah, ha, yeah, oh, ho, hey, ah, yeah, oh, hey, oh. Yana, 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 oh, ho, way, oh, way, ha, ya, oh, ho, way, ha, ya, oh, ho, way, ha, ya, oh, way, oh, hey, yana, 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 oh, hey, oh, yana, 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 oh, hey, oh. Way oh way ha ya oh ho way ha ya oh ho way ha ya oh way oh hey oh yeah, 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 la, yeah, la, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, ho, hey, oh, hey, yeah, la, yeah, la, yeah, la, oh, hey, yeah, la, yeah, la, yeah, oh, hey, way oh way oh ha yo oh ho way oh ha yo oh ho way oh ha yo oh way oh ha lo oh yeah te ha no yeah no wa che pe ha yo ha yeah no wa che pe ha yo ha yeah no oh yeah te he chan de ha watch de alo ha yo say yes guys thank you.
Well, and Jacob, thank you for sharing that song with us and opening us in a good way today. We're going to carry those good feelings throughout this conversation. So yes, thank you again for being here with us. Before we dive in, I just wanted to quickly take a moment to thank you to our ASL interpreters from Coco Language Advocacy and Consulting. Our interpreters today are Keely and Santana, and we're so grateful to have you here and have your support in making this space accessible. And you can learn more about Coco by visiting their website. It's www.cocollc.org, and somebody should be putting that in the chat. For folks to be able to check out. Before we get started, I'm just going to quickly go through some housekeeping items. So if you're not speaking, please keep yourself muted just so that we can hear everybody and yeah, so we can hear the people that are talking. There will be a Q&A later in the agenda. So for audience members that are here, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat and we have somebody that will be recording them and yeah, we'll get to them later on in the agenda. So just wanted to name that. There are no breaks for our session today. It is about an hour and a half, but please take breaks as you need them. And last but not least, today's session will be recorded and put on ICA's YouTube in the coming week. So keep your eyes peeled for that and let your friends know in case they weren't able to make it and are interested in tuning in. So with that, I think we can get started. Um, as you all know, today's session is about campaigns. And one of the reasons we chose that is because uh, too much of the climate discourse right now is still shaped by colonial frameworks and driven by false corporate solutions. So this series as a whole is about pushing back on that and centering Indigenous knowledge systems, frontline experiences, and the kinds of insights that emerge through organizing, land defense, and community action. So we tried to choose topics for these sessions that move those conversations forward. And we believe that these are the conversations that actually make just and livable climate futures possible. Um, this actually isn't just a speaker series, it's also going to be a part of how we're rethinking research and policy at ICA. Each session is designed to be a space for knowledge exchange, but also a place where we can listen and intentionally understand what's working, what's not, and what communities actually need. So everything, we just wanted to name for transparency that everything across this series that is shared will help shape our research and policy efforts moving forward. So this is very much a living and relational process, and we're just really excited to get started on this. This is the first of three series, as I mentioned. So the second session will be happening on August 13th, and that will be on Beyond Reports, Exploring Indigenous Aesthetic Practices as Legitimate Forms of Climate Research and Political Analysis. So Indigenous aesthetic practices is just a fancy way of saying art and story and ceremony. So that again is on August 13th. And then the third and last session will be on October 15th, and it will be on Indigenous governance and carbon economies. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for our social media for more details on those sessions, but we just wanted to name that before we dive in. So ICA is lucky enough to be hosting this series by partnering with Research for the Frontlines and the University of Victoria's Transformative Action Program. For those of you who may not be familiar with ICA, we are an Indigenous-led organization guided by a diverse group of Indigenous knowledge keepers, water protectors, and land defenders from communities and regions across so-called Canada. For more information, you can check out our website, www.indigenousclimateaction.com, and the link for that will also be posted in the chat. So with that, I will pass it off to Jen to just share some details about Research for the Frontlines and UVic's Transformative Action Program.
Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us today. I'm a research coordinator with Research for the Frontlines, and I've had the honor and privilege of supporting ICA's research over the years. Alexa and I work closely together on all kinds of stuff. And Research for the Frontlines is a national grassroots organization that supports the research needs of communities and movements who are fighting for environmental and climate justice, folks who are disproportionately and directly impacted by climate change and the industries and systems causing climate change. So if you're part of a community or a movement that is fighting for climate justice or environmental justice or land back, and you have research needs and could use support doing that research, let us know. We'd love to help. Or if you're someone who has research skills and time to offer and would like to join our wonderful network of research volunteers and mentors who offer their time and labor in service to frontline movements, get in touch. Check out our website. Yeah, I'll share the website on the chat. And I'm also involved in this series through my involvement with University of Victoria's Transformative Climate Action Program. So I get to teach a course on organizing in their program, and this program is very cool. So you can check it out. It's in a collaboration between their School of Environment and their Continuing Studies program. And it's meant to be very accessible. So it's all online, it's asynchronous. You can engage with the course whenever is good for you during your week. It's for, single parents and rural folks and working professionals or anyone for whatever reason can't get to a university for courses. But it's great, and it's really aimed to help people build the skills and knowledge to engage in the fight for climate justice in really impactful and transformative ways. And this series is also part of UVic's Transformative Climate Action program's way of beginning to develop ideas and relationships for a new course that they're developing on Indigenous-led climate action and solutions that they'll be developing over the coming year. So thinking about starting to gather ideas for that material, as well as building relationships with people who might be interested in helping design that course or helping teach that course. So that's what I wanted to share, and I'll share more links in the chat. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Jen. So with that, I think we can get started and pass it off to our speakers. So for today's conversation, as you all know, we're focusing on campaigns. We're not just focusing on them as advocacy tools, but as spaces where knowledge is constantly being created. Campaigns generate strategy, relationships, political analysis, and lessons in real time. So instead of treating organizing as something to study after the fact, we wanted to bring these speakers here today to ask, what do we learn through organizing itself? And the speakers here are each deeply involved in protecting their lands, waters, and communities from harms of settler colonialism and extractivism. And they're all doing important work, the important work of building Indigenous self-determined solutions and futures. Each speaker brings their own unique perspectives to this collective work. And I'm really honored to be joined by Sleydo Molly Wickham, Jesse Stoeppler, and Tia Kennedy today. So I'm going to invite each of you to introduce yourselves, your community, and the campaign or movement you've been a part of. With that, let's start with you, Sleydo.
Thank you so much, Denise. Tsakaise, Skaise, Sai Sleydo, Sydney, Gidim Den Hesley, Witsotenes Den. Sies Hitlimas Tla Ayet Tot Yes Tla Wini and Ludispin Tla Genufkat Wiste. So my name is Sleydo. I hold the name in Cassia, which is in the Gidimden clan, and I live and work on Cassia territory, the Genufkat and Ludispin territories. And I have 3 beautiful children. And I've been the spokesperson for the Gidimden checkpoint, which is a reoccupation of our territory on the Ludispin territory since 2018. And I've been living on the territory with my family. We built a cabin out on Rienta since 2000 or built it in 2012. So I've been raising my family on the land and deeply involved in our traditional hereditary governance system. And just really glad to be here today. Thanks for organizing this. All of it sounds very exciting. And I'm really interested to see what comes out of it. And also honored to be here with Tia and Jesse, some buddies of mine. And I'm really interested in diving into all of the questions and the work that we're talking about today. So I would say.
Well, Sleydo, it is an honor to have you here with us. We're so excited to be in conversation with you. And with that, I'll pass it off to you, Jesse, to introduce yourself, and then Tia.
Wasim Gaget, Sigadam Hanach, Kant Wilsis, Denise, Tsakaise, Skaise. My name is Guilachem Gabu. My taxpayer name is Jesse Stoeppler. And I belong to Wilpspok. We are a Gixan house, and yeah, my home is unique, as we're on the boundary of Gixan and Wet'suwet'en land, and I've always identified with both nations. I have family equally on on within the Wet'suwet'en and the Giksan, and yeah, both make me feel at home, and yeah, it's a real honor to be here. It's great to see so many friendly faces, and I'm happy to contribute wherever I can. Thanks.
Hi, Buju Gunukwe Nishnakaz Megaze Dorem Bekeshgunan Dunjaba Minwa Oneida Dunjaba Nishnawbe Queen Dao. My name's Tia Kennedy. I come from two communities here in southwestern Ontario, Bekeshgunong, where the waters divide. It's like the most southwestern point you can go before you hit the American side. And then I'm also from Oneida Nation of the Thames, where I'm a registered band member. Um, Watpool is where I grew up more so that's where my Anishinaabe teachings are rooted, my worldview is rooted. And um, yeah, we've been impacted by polluting from what's known as Chemical Valley. But we're 40% of Canada's petrochemical industry operates 24/7. It's just upstream from us, so everything that's getting dumped is getting dumped into our waterways. So I do a lot of advocacy work around that, as it's, impacted my family greatly, which has kind of transformed into different methods of organizing and campaigning through traditional governance, through revitalizing our ceremonies. But I've also been working on different initiatives in my other community of Oneida Nation of the Thames. So at 13 Moons Land-Based Learning, it's been a grassroots movement for about 25 years. But just in the last few, I've been supporting through some policy development and just securing more funds so that it can be more accessible to youth in our community, to everyone, just in connecting to the land. So I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about that today, and just happy to be here and excited for some of these conversations.
Thank you so much, Sleydo, Jesse, and Tia. It's so exciting to hear of the depth of the work that you're all doing and the experiences that you're bringing to this conversation. What I heard is that each of you have been involved in different organizing efforts that have not only generated change on the ground, but also important lessons and relationships. So, as we move forward in our first set of questions, I wanted to focus on the knowledge that emerges from organizing itself. So what I'm going to do is ask a question, and we kind of do popcorn style. Whoever feels called to answer can do that. And the first question I wanted to ask everyone is, at what moments in a campaign do the most important lessons tend to emerge for you?
I was thinking about this last night. I thought I better read the questions before tomorrow so I can think of the answers. One of the things that we've experienced and that I've experienced is that when there's, specifically in land defense and on front lines, when there is conflict, the conflict builds and builds and builds. And then uh, there's a breaking point. Then something happens. For us, it was raids year after year after year. So in our situation in Wet'suwet'en territory, I feel like it's pretty unique because oftentimes there'll be a tension, and then something will happen, and then things on front lines often dissipate, or there's like a tension for a long period of time, and then things dissipate. And it's in those moments after the tension dissipates that I think we learn the most about our movement. We learn the most about what is required to grow our movement, what is required to protect ourselves, the types of healing that are required, because everything rears its ugly head after the point of conflict comes to a head. And so I think that is one of the most critical times to be really reflective of the work and to be really reflective of the people and how we're going to continue our movements on and how we're going to grow our movements and to build the kinds of communities that we want to live in. Because ultimately, this isn't just about one campaign. So in our case, we were resisting the Coastal GasLink pipeline for over a decade. Since Una Stoughton started resisting all the pipelines in the territory quite a long time ago, back in the early 2000 or 2010, around then. And so things really came to a head, but the work had been going on for a really long time. And the conflict lasted for multiple years. And so that was a really important time for us to see what was coming up, the conflicts that happen in our community, the pain and the trauma that happened to people. And then also, like, where were we missing things? So for example, we've gone through a lot of court cases. This is just like I want to say a micro example, but it's actually a really important thing, is that we learned how to do the best court support and jail support that a lot of people have ever seen, because so many people were getting arrested. We would have raids, massive militarized raids where there was, sometimes 30 to 50 people being arrested at once. And so we had to learn how to take care of one another. We had to learn how to heal together as a community. We had to learn all the things that we needed to have in place before those things ever happened again, which they did year after year. And so there's so many examples like that come when the conflict, everybody's great when the conflict is happening. Everybody will do whatever they can. People are going to work together really well. People are going to show up and give 120%. And it's in those moments after the conflict dissipates that we really need to look at how we're building our movements and how we're building the types of communities and relationships that we want to see into the future.
Well, Lal and Molly, Jesse and Tia, I'm wondering if you have anything to share. And also as a follow-up, because that brought something up too, is how do you carry forward or hold on to that knowledge as you move forward in campaigns? So yeah, Molly, if you wanted to come back to that later, feel free, but just wanted to add that in there as a consideration for folks.
And I noticed Tia and myself unmuted at the same time. I'm happy to give up my spot
Yeah.
to you.
No, you can jump in, Jesse.
Yeah, I would agree with what we've heard from Sleydo. I truly value and put relationship at the center of any and all of this work. Only speaking for Giksan and Matua, then the conflict that is attached and the struggles and trauma that are attached to this resurgence of a gold rush mentality in this energy sector, relating to upwards of 11 or more mega projects that were proposed for our lands over the last, I would say, 20 years. Really, I think shaped us and so many people. And we've learned so much every time, despite the fact that we continue to see this moving goalpost. So we're subjected to one struggle, and it's industry and it's elected leadership, both within our own communities, within I think the Indian Act-based band structures, as well as provincial and federal governments that will bunch up and move that goalpost together. So that always puts us and people at the front lines into a really difficult position of I mean, we want to be proactive and we would like to prepare, and it's really hard when the boundaries constantly change, and we saw a lot of that. But I think when it comes to allyship and when it comes to the greater like NGO sector that chose to in large numbers support land defense. Um, it's one thing to have a campaign written and structured in a way that it support um, the people doing the boots on the ground um, until shit hits the fan and things become uncomfortable, and then we usually see who who has a shiny campaign written and who actually shows up, and that's when I learned a lot, and I think it deepened my belief in valuing relationship, and that certainly moves at the speed of trust.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, some of the lessons where we've learned some of the most important lessons, I guess, in moments has been when stuff is, breaking down. And it's kind of like that tower moment with the tarot cards, where it's falling, but then it's an opportunity to rebuild in a better and bigger way. And I'm always really grateful about just recognizing like who we have on our team on those moments, what kind of gifts each person brings to the table, because it's really important to have people that understand the mission, the purpose, the vision, and share that same determination to continue forward when those moments are kind of coming down. And oftentimes we're really fortunate with our movements where we're working in more like of a traditional governance mindset. So we're thinking about the different gifts that, people, but also clans carry. We're thinking about the intergenerational knowledge transmission between elders and youth. And so really pulling on their strengths to talk and come together and think about ways, okay, how are we going to work together to continue moving forward and getting through those challenges. And I find that's where we really start to center our relationships, center wellness. And then once we're kind of feeling well, because usually when these movements or we're organizing is happening, we're in this constant, like, of course, we love the work and we're passionate about it, but it's also we're putting all of ourselves into the work. And so at times you can feel burnt out, but you have the momentum, so you just keep going. But when things do, if they do come tumbling down for a moment, and we're thinking about that rebuilding process, we're also giving ourselves an opportunity to recharge and think about ways we can move forward and have wellness built into that rebuild or that repair that we need while we're organizing. So there's usually a lot of really great lessons about the importance of taking care of ourselves, taking care of one another, and just what it really means to come together as a community to continue moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I really like what you're saying about, um, building the wellness into the movement, because that is really what we are trying to do. And I've always said when things seem the hardest, that's when we have to push harder. That's when we have to keep going because we know like we're on the brink of something. Like even if it's that everything fell apart and now we have to rebuild, like in 2019, they came and, oh, I don't know how many times the industry and the RCMP and the government have come and literally tore down everything, like come and bulldozed our community that we built and our structures and our living quarters and like where, all the things. And so there's, on that level, there's so many ways that it's like when you are resisting And when there is a resurgence and those hard things come up, whether it's like resistance to industry or government, or whether it's like an internal thing, or a community thing, uh, we really have to know and have the tools and the ability to push through that, because that's where our growth happens. You know, when conflict happens on any level, when uh, there's an opportunity there. And that's where we have to really be cognizant of what we're learning and what we need to do to move forward. And I think that, you know, I was right now I'm at Unistoten, and I'm participating in a language knowledge, a language gathering. And so there's about 15 to 20 elders, hereditary chiefs, and knowledge keepers, all language speakers here. And we're gathering the language for different things to develop curriculum. Um, and so this is part of the work. This is part of the community building. This is part of like, how do we keep going time after time after time? Because we know that we're doing something right when we come up against these challenges. We know that that's an opportunity for growth. That's an opportunity. There's a lesson there that we need to know and that we need to learn. And the way that we are able to get through that is always about the land. Is always like, that's how we refill our cup. That's how we are able to withstand and deal with the kinds of traumas and the conflicts and things that we come up against. Because it would be easier to not do the work. It would be easier just to do the nice things and the happy things and the things that make us all feel good. And there's a lot of that in this work. You know, there's a lot of those moments and a lot of those spaces. But there's also a lot of the things that we have to work through. And I think that is like, that's really the key to the creation of knowledge and learning and growth in our movement. So we know that we have to continue on, or all of it would be for, you know, we would lose all of that knowledge.
Thank you so much, all of you, for those reflections. What I hear is how much knowledge is generated through organizing and how much of it is rooted in relationships, not just with each other, but with yourself. And that reflection piece is so important too. I really, really appreciated that piece about how important it is to care for yourself, and recharge while you're doing this work, because I think it's a big part of how this work is going to be sustained and can continue on and be done in a good way. So I just wanted to name that. This next section is about gaps and tensions. Many of us work in spaces that try to document or translate the experiences that you're all talking about, into research or policy. And that process, in some ways, it can create opportunities, but a lot of the times it can create tension for the people that are on the ground doing the work. And so I'd like to spend a little bit of time exploring this. So I want to talk about what do you feel, is the knowledge from these organizing spaces, that gets left out of reports or research, what gets lost in translation, or what feels extractive. And we'll just do it the same way, popcorn style. Whoever wants to go next can go. And we'll have the question in the chat too.
Oh, I can go first. I think the biggest piece from an organizational standpoint is the fact that we often use pieces of the same colonial system that we're fighting, and often the nuts and bolts of that are just not ready for the approaches or the bottom line use of this capacity. I think framework is and needs to be decolonized more, and that's something that's not new. But over the last few years, I witnessed Indigenous people finding a voice in decision making in many of these spaces when it comes to allied organizations and NGOs. Um, and that elevates, I think, a level of understanding, and I hear a lot of younger voices that really gives me hope in actively decolonizing this sector. Um, I think that in most cases the NGO world is not prepared to at least commit or admit the level of radical thinking that it takes to actually do the work that's needed because we're too worried about staying within the boundary of fulfilling a proposal that was put forward to access capacity at some point, or we have to be sneaky about how we spend this capacity, and that works to some extent. But when someone analyzes that and wants to figure out what works and what doesn't work, these really important pieces never make it to the top. And if they don't make it to the top, it's really difficult to prioritize them. And more recently, um, so in my professional career, I'm also the executive director for a mid-sized organization called Skeena Watershed Conservation Coalition, and over the years, I witnessed this shift in systems, and and, um, and more recently, I attended a few gatherings of just like yeah, just funders getting together and discussing very similar topics, and these are the places that when someone said something that sounded somewhat radical, everyone would turn around and hush them really quick and say, "No, don't you can't say that here." But that's also changed. The some of the priorities that I heard come to the top at these meetings were really amazing, and and I feel like these were things that we've been talking about for years and that we always wished we would see, and I think the collective degradation of the political landscape, not only within so-called Canada, but also the US and other around the world, really, has led to maybe a fast tracking of some positive framework finally, aside from all the other fast tracking.
Um, when I was thinking of this, there was a story that happened to us, an experience that immediately kind of popped out. Because I think, yeah, like a lot of people talk about, oh, let's decolonize, or um, we want to decolonize our policies, we want to decolonize our reports, our way of doing things. But I think people really lack the understanding of what that can look like. And when it looks a little bit too radical, people get uncomfortable with that. Um, and so there's this kind of like fine line, like you can decolonize, but not too much. And to me, that's not fully allowing, Indigenous ways of knowing and being to present itself in their full authenticity. Um, we were still considered grassroots at 13 Moons. We've become a not-for-profit organization that's registered. And because we were getting people that wanted to attend the land-based camps and their clients, their participants, their students. But one of the things they said is, oh, well, do you guys have insurance? Um, they were concerned about, we have axes there, so kids might be chopping wood, things like that. And each morning before we start the day, we do an opening. So it's grounded our language, giving thanks. And we do that to let the natural world know around us that here's what we're going to be doing for today. There's a pipe ceremony included in there. And we ask for that protection, that things are going to be done in a good way. That while, hunters are out, that they're safe and they get back safely. And so for us, that's our form of insurance. That's how we know that things are going to be run smoothly, that people aren't going to get hurt. And that's our responsibility. And so we understand that we have this responsibility each morning to open and close our days for ourselves, for the people that are coming and taking care of us. But when people hear that, oh, that's our form of insurance, that becomes too radical or too decolonial for them to understand. So I think there's still a lot that needs to be done in terms of like just understanding teachings and um, why we're doing things the way that we're doing things. That's not necessarily easy to articulate in policy reports, but I do see there's a shift happening. Again, it's just that fine line of is that too decolonized or is it decolonized enough?
Thank you. So I kind of went on a tangent last night when I was thinking about this question. So bear with me. Um, I'm a little bit obsessed with Leanne Simpson's Theory of Water right now. And so if you haven't read it, you should read it. And uh, it's all about world making and centering, how things center together and how a snow, I'm going to butcher the description and actual theory of this, but the idea is that everything that we do, everything that we make, every ceremony that we do, every intention that we set, um, the way that we are together, this is all world making. And so when I think that one of the things people need to understand is that, um, our campaigns, maybe like we had a campaign against the Coastal GasLink pipeline, but this isn't a one-time event. This is a way of life for us. And so that holistic way of seeing our campaigns and our resistance is so important. And a lot of people, I've been in rooms before where people have said, I've been talking about how we're at war with Canada and how Canada is trying to kill us. And they said, maybe if you framed it differently, people would support you because that's not a nice way to think about it. We don't want to think about it as war, but we can't sugarcoat it. We need to really, the way that we do it, the how we are in relationship with one another and with the land and with resistance is the way we are making the world we want to live in and how we are doing world making. And so land-based organizing is about world making. We're working collectively to build the world one struggle at a time and one blockade at a time that we want to live in. And so resistance is strategic. It's not about winning or losing. Winning versus losing creates this illusion of a binary when that's not the point of resistance in the first place. So many people, and I've talked about this before, like, oh, did you guys, you lost. So, or how do you feel about not winning? And I've heard a lot of leaders recently talk about, well, if we're not going to win, then we're not going to engage. Like, we're only going to fight if we can win. And that way of thinking about like we're either going to win or we're either going to lose. I'm sitting in a healing center in the middle of sovereign Indigenous Unistoten territory, full of Indigenous leaders, hereditary chiefs, knowledge holders that are doing world making work right now and have been for since time immemorial. And so coming back to those things, that's a win, you know? And so we struggle because not to means that we lose a piece of ourselves. We lose our land, we lose our destiny, we lose the world that we could have made if we were engaged in resurgence, if we were engaged in resistance. And you can't have resurgence without resistance. You know, when you try to have resurgence, you will come up against the state in one way or another. You will come up against, whether it's on a micro level or a macro level, like we saw, you know, that's like very, very overt, and they're literally coming at you with guns, or they're telling you like that you have to have insurance and you can't do this or that because that's not the way things are and the policies don't allow for it. And so our collective world making has gathered all kinds of knowledges from non-Indigenous accomplices, from anarchists, from allied Indigenous nations, all rooted in Anuktitut, all rooted in Indigenous law. And so I think that's one of the important things to think about when we're talking about research and knowledge gathering and knowledge making, that we can't look at it just as one campaign or another and then walk away from the conversation. And we've been really fortunate to be involved with groups that that continue that fight. And the most important thing is to be there after the conflict is over, when all of that knowledge is being gathered, when all of that knowledge is being realized. And so we need to continue the exploration and build on our strengths. And see, I see this as a huge issue in our movement because we're not growing the way that we could be growing if we were doing this, if we were gathering all of that knowledge in those most critical times and moving it forward. And so one of the questions in the previous section was about how are we moving that knowledge forward. And so for me, it's been about mentorship. So there are young people, young Indigenous women that I've worked very, very closely with, that have all of that knowledge in their 20s, you know, and that have experienced all of these things that can now go out and do that work. And so Indigenous led and grounded reflections are one of the most important things that I can see that we can be doing. You know, in the military, they call them after action reviews. But what are our after action reviews? And we have to have this very deep analysis of conflict, and be able to relay that to people in a secure and accessible way. So we need to keep talking about the movement overall, not just like one campaign and piecemeal the movement together, I think is really important. What have each of our movements or actions taught us to how to move forward to strengthen our ability, you know, to create the world we can live in, not just the world we want to live in, but we're at risk of not being able to live in a world at all. So what is the world that we can live in, and what is the world that we want to live in? And that includes social responsibility, mutual aid, you know, collective accountability, shared vision, safety, skills building, all of these different things. So I think really seeing it in a holistic way, from grounded in Indigenous laws and ways of being, is really important, and not just seeing it as one-time events in the broader scheme of our history. That's
Well, thank you so much. I was just getting like reading the notes from this discussion, and I'm just so excited. I'm hearing like kind of hints of abolitionist thinking in my mind, and a lot of times people think that that means of like getting rid of everything and that's it, and like it's a negative, but it's really about building new worlds. And I think that being together and having these conversations together and inviting others to participate and hear your perspectives is a part of that world building that you're talking about. And Tia, when you were speaking of like, you know, people wanting to limit their understandings of what decolonization means to fit into their kind of narratives and agenda. That happens so much. And I think oftentimes people, what they really mean is they want to indigenize a space, whatever that means to them. They don't really want to bring in those, like those true values of decolonization. And I think it's so important that we keep pushing back and having these conversations and defining what that looks like for us and not, you know, muddying it for anybody. So yeah, I'm just really excited by everything I'm hearing. Um, and rather like I'm just kind of doing a time check. There's so many questions I'd like to ask, but we kind of had to narrow it a bit from the original set we had sent out. So we don't want to end this conversation at critique. We'd actually like to talk about the possibilities that do exist and what this work could look like if it was done differently and with proper support from other folks. So um, my question to all of you is, what could research look like and policy work? What could that look like if it were aligned with campaigns? So thinking of like the organizations that are hoping to support, like ICA, what could our work look like if it were aligned with the work you are doing instead of kind of like an after? Um,
Okay, who's gonna go first? I'll be short this time. I know I can be long-winded, so I apologize if I took up a lot of space there. Um, okay, I have some thoughts and ideas about that logistically, can I think would be helpful. One of the big things is we need kind of like a buffer zone. And I know Jesse's heard me talk about this before with our lawyers, where I'm like, you are simply a buffer zone. Your job is to keep us out of jail. You're doing a great job. But I think that research and different organizations and policies can be that buffer zone, like Jesse was saying earlier, to like take away those difficult pieces for us to be able to do our work. So we want to just be able to do our work. So whatever that is, like if we're reoccupying territory, if we're creating space for knowledge transfer and youth work and all of those things. So it should be the job of different organizations to change their policies so that they can be that buffer zone for us, or for the research to find those ways that can be the buffer zone for us so that we don't have to do that work. I adore it when somebody comes up to me and says, I see this as like a gap that maybe needs to be filled. Can we fill that for you? And I'm like, yes, go to town. And then they can either take as little or as much direction from us as we have the capacity for or as is required. And then that work just goes and happens. And that is one of the most beautiful things that I've seen happen with organizing, like grassroots organizing and land defense, is that people can just pick up the piece, they can see and, they can see where the work needs to be done. And then with like very little direction from us in cases, then they can just go and do that work. So I think that that's really important thing to do. And then the other thing is gathering all of that knowledge. So I think one way to transfer the knowledge is through, I don't know how many podcasts I've been on and interviews I've done and all of these different things. And so to gather those things together that different people are sharing and have an accessible way for people to learn to have access to that knowledge, from a variety of different fronts, which is a really easy way, I think, for different organizations to put time and energy into knowledge gathering, and to be able to share those in ways. And so it's already all there. So, I'm sure that I've done interviews on and podcasts about every single subject that I know about. Um, and so having that accessible to people, or like not for everybody, because we all have different things to share. So I think that would be a really cool way that organizations and research can help transfer that knowledge. those are some of my ideas. How about Sam?
I'm happy to go next, but I can wait.
I'll just kind of echo Sleydo and what she mentioned there. Yeah, I think when you're organizing, and something that I found for myself, especially like as a person that was really focused on advocacy at one point, and basically was leaving my community, my home, to be out in other places advocating for my community and for my home. And then transitioning from that to being just grounded and rooted in my community, because that's where I felt like I could find the most benefit from my work, of terms of just like being there, being present. Okay, this knowledge that I've went out, gathered information of, now I can bring that back home and implement those things. But now that I'm home, people aren't hearing the issues or solutions that we have. It's just us and our community that are doing the work. And when you're in the work, you're in the work. There's no time to be focusing on other things, like especially us, because we're land-based, so we work with the seasons, and it's like you miss a couple weeks, like you might miss a whole season of picking medicines or picking berries, and that's your food storage for your year, right? Like you don't have another opportunity for that until the next 13 moon calendar. And so being at home and being able to do that work is super important. But there's also that other piece of, how do we get this message shared about the work that we're doing and the issues that we're still facing. And so finding the people that are willing to support us and come and visit with us and sit with us and have a really thorough understanding of our experiences, and just that relationship building, like even beyond the agendas, beyond the campaigns, beyond all of that stuff. Like, how are we building those relationships? So when you are out there, you're like, oh, okay, this is what they're doing. Here's how we can help amplify their voice and their message, and continue supporting the things that they're doing in the community. And I've been finding like something we've been really focused on recently is partnerships, especially with like long-standing NGOs. So NGOs that have been established for like 25, 50 years. They have a good history of finances, history of policies, and those are the things that oftentimes funders want to see. And so we've been coming together to do these partnerships. So essentially, they can help us secure and funnel the funds so that we can continue to do the work that needs to get done without having to worry about the red tape constantly. And so I find just being able to build those relationships and partnerships, and we've had like a few people that, come into our space, and sometimes they're just there to build relationship. They're not even there for the partnership agreement or agenda. And so those to me are some of the most meaningful relationships and partnerships that we've been able to build with like other NGOs and organizers that have really supported us.
I think it's an excellent question. And I also acknowledge that I certainly don't hold a recipe to success. I really agree with what we've heard from Tia and from Sleydo. Also really happy that Sleydo mentioned lawyers. Um, I think lawyers are taxi drivers, and we pay them to take us someplace. But in order for that to happen, we also need to know where we want to go and why. Otherwise, they're just going to take us for a ride. And we've seen decades and decades of that. And lawyers certainly have been the true winners in that fight. But that's also changing, and that comes with education. Um, and I think often we take an approach, or we see an approach being taken that um, makes the assumption that power is being held by one decision maker, by one person, by a leader, and I think that doesn't really reflect many other indigenous governance systems where power is being held by the collective, and leadership is leading from the bottom up and is about uplifting and um, encouraging and empowering people. That certainly is what I see within my society, and I see um, outside of the patrilineal like Western society, I see females being empowered and uplifted and encouraged, and that gives me hope. And young people are being normalized to be in these spaces of decision making with us on a daily basis. Um, I I always ensure that wherever I go, there is younger people. That I can support by just being there. That is what we see in our feast halls, where our lawmaking happens, so that we cannot expect at some point for these young people to be in positions of power and decision making, while not exposing them to that in a safe way beforehand, and then they'll face all of the different aspects of other societies and Western worlds that we've been trying to protect them from all at once. And that can be pretty overwhelming too. So I would say normalize to be inclusive of younger people of all genders, and to create these spaces where a safe transfer of knowledge and a safe transfer of power can naturally occur. That happens, I think, when we collaborate, and it has to be driven by education. I think we can't expect that every other society thinks alike, and that's based on relationship. We've already established that, and I think oftentimes when it comes to the real change making is also led by litigation. So that's the piece that people sometimes don't want to talk about. There are pieces of our society that we don't want to interact with, but we're forced to. And it's really, really important, I think, to litigate that, to take other decision makers to their house of law. In the Western society, that's the court system, and we've had so many generations before us, especially, and I'm speaking on behalf of Giksanama and when it comes to the Delgamo Kastewi decision, that have blazed an amazing path for us, um, and we do have to continue that. That costs money and it costs energy and time. It causes trauma and and many other byproducts, but that has to be coupled with public education. Um, and ultimately it will lead to decision-making power, and that is what's needed. I think title holders need to be in the driver's seat when it comes to a decision making that has a huge effect on them, and that means you have to have the power to say yes, and you have to have the power to say no. Otherwise, you're just not holding power. And that's most certainly, I think, one of the biggest issues when it comes to provincial and federal uh, governments. They're so happy to give First Nations people power to say yes, and then try everything they can to shut them up if there's a chance they might say no. So um, wherever that's possible, I think based on relationship, use other people's privilege. It's there's nothing wrong with it. It has happened and occurred at the expense of Indigenous people for a very long time, and I think there's a way to do this coupled with kindness and respect. Um, and that is probably the piece that will lead to systems change. So I would encourage that, and I think if it comes with these other values that I talked about, and education and relationship, we should be in pretty good shape.
Thank you so much, Jesse. You had a couple of mic drop moments in there, like the what you said about it. Um, you need the power to say yes and the power to say no. And if you don't have both, you just don't have the power. I love that. I think what you were talking about kind of brings us into our next conversation about how can organizations who are looking to support the work you're doing contribute to the work you're doing without extracting.
Do all the reporting and the grant writing for us. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, we've all talked about it before, and I really heard this very loudly from Chia, and I know Jesse knows about this too, but this is the administrative side of it and like the colonial systems side of it, I think is just really, really challenging and it just is in such contrast to the work that we're trying to do. And building that capacity, I think, is also really great. So learning how to do that, bringing people in ways that support the ability to grow was really important. But I think also, yeah, just taking on some of the pieces and being there throughout the whole thing, like knowing that this is a long game. This is the long game. This isn't about Coastal GasLink pipeline project, and it's not about the compressor stations, and it's not about, the next project that's coming, because they're coming, and they're coming fast, and they're coming hard, and there's a lot of them. And so it's never going to end, but really, what are we building in to be preventative? Like what does our resurgence look like on the ground? And it might not be as flashy. It might not be as exciting as the conflicts that we've seen, but that's where the real work is happening. That's like where we're building and getting stronger. And, I look around at like what the different clans and Wet'suwet'en are doing and what other Indigenous nations are doing to build that strength so that we can be more less reactive and more proactive in our resurgence and our resistance, that we have to build up those things. And so really being there when it's not cute and when it's not, to trust us as well, to trust our decision making, to trust what we're asking for, and to be there at the times when it's not the most popular thing to do.
Yeah, I would say just being really intentional with your research. Like, I do have academic background, and it was really important for me when I was doing my master's to ensure that my research was going to contribute to something. It wasn't just going to be observation, but it was actually going to be about like changing power in some sort of way. And trying my best to make that happen. And so I think sometimes research can become to a point where it's just okay, we're going to write about it and move to the next stage. But I think it also, the point Sleydo talked about is like this is a long-term commitment. It doesn't begin with the issue. It should already be, that relationship building should already be there. And there's going to be, some issues, conflict that arises throughout the process, but it's also like being there afterwards as well, in relationship, and just continuously working on like how can this help change the power dynamics? How is my research really contributing to that? Um, and I think that's really important when organizations are trying not to be extractive. I think too, like the decision making is super important. So, who's creating the agendas, who's leading the discussions, but also who has the capacity to do this work. And is there anybody or any funding that can be contributed to our team or our efforts to ensure that, we do have the capacity to lead this work the way that we want to lead it? I think that's another big important issue. I find like sometimes, especially with the government, when they talk about partnerships, collaborations, and like shared decision making, they only have, especially with our First Nation, we might only have one or two people being able to contribute to that project that also have multiple other projects happening at the same time. And yet they have a team of a dozen people, and now they're the ones that are leading the agenda making. They're the ones that are leading these discussions because they have more capacity. But what would it look like if some of those people were brought onto our team and were under our, employment and were employees of us rather than of the Canadian government? I think there would be a difference there for sure. Because at the end of the day, most people are just trying to keep their job and they're going to adhere to whoever their employer is. So I think things like that is a step in the right direction, is just rethinking how things are done. And I think that talks a little bit about too Jesse's point of, we have to really think about these power shifts and being able to have the power to say no as well.
I think it's also really helpful to when we, as Indigenous people, move and do this work. It's very good to be true about the impacts, um, because we've arrived at a point where the impacts are widely felt, far outside of just Indigenous people. In Canada's like onslaught of being this elbows up nation, um, uh, we're missing voices, I think, in really important stages that help non-Indigenous people understand that there are many implications that will be felt by non-Indigenous people, by other taxpayers, and maybe it's not their land necessarily that's being seized and used, but certainly their resources as far as taxpayer money that enable that behavior, right? So I think the answer um, cannot be to take a white paper and simply paint it brown. That takes us right back to the binary approach that Sleydo mentioned at the very beginning. It cannot be binary. We're not ones and zeros. So I think it's about trying to find a way to meet the needs of each other. Um, a big takeaway for myself from the Delgamuukw decision was uh, to hear title holders say that decision making has to be for the betterment of all. Some things will just simply not change, and that is that we are here to share this land, and we have to find a way that we can live together, and so decision making has to be for the betterment of all. And when we apply this to philanthropy and the NGO sector, it's very simple actions. Slash all admin fees. Quit trying to get rich off the backs of Indigenous people that had to work super hard for medium, micro, mini, medium grants, whatever. Um, I think we've arrived at a point where the funding world has learned that capacity has to be made available on a multi-year term basis, so that we don't just start projects and then simply end before they ever come to fruition. Um, these NGOs cannot
or should not be charging 10, 15, 20. Universities are the worst at 20 and 30% admin fees for simply doing nothing, just for being part of the system, for administering capacity that belongs to frontline groups, to Indigenous people, to title holders that had to work super hard off the side of their desk to get any of this, right? Most title holders don't have staff. They can't say, oh, we'll just push this off to the comms department or to the legal department. No, you're looking at them. They're slugging away. They're working a day job that often is really not nice, as many other people do. But then they're forced to solve these issues and bring solutions to the table that are triggered by implications and triggered by causes that they have not asked for. They didn't create these problems, and now they're forced to bring the solutions to the table and also pay for that. So these are just from an economic perspective things that cannot work out, and they have to change, and they are changing, which is really good and great to see. And yeah, it's yeah, meet the needs. That's really that's where it's at. And it's happening, and I'm really happy and welcome that.
Thank you, Tia, Jesse, and Sleydo. Sorry, I'm dealing with a bit of a cold. But sorry. Okay. This next section was going to be a Q&A for folks in the audience. I don't see any questions, and I know, oh, my dog is getting mad at me. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I do have a closing reflection question for folks, just to end it on a high note. And that is, what gives you more hope for the future of movements and organizing?
Oh, so I think it's youth, 100%. I'm seeing youth stepping into places that they deserve, stepping into places that many of us have worked for to exist, and they're showing up with fire in their eyes. But they couple that with kindness and with knowledge and wisdom, and that gives me like the most hope, 100%. And they're everywhere, and yeah, I think it's great to see.
I think what gives me hope is to see that the possibilities of what we can accomplish as Indigenous people, as hereditary people. I'm seeing governance play out on the land. I'm seeing it being implemented in many communities across Turtle Island. I'm seeing people holding up their laws and holding up their way of life, and creating, as they're doing that, creating more space for that. And so just like decolonization, there's not an end goal. We're actually doing it right now. You know, like Unistoten right here in their village site on their sovereign territory, where they make the decisions about what happens on their territory. Their house group are the ones that are leading those decisions. They're the ones that are leading this camp, that are coming up with the ideas of the things they want to do. They're building the infrastructure that they require to have more people on the land. That is our governance in action, and it's actually happening not only here, but all over Turtle Island in little pockets. And so that's what gives me hope, because we're actually realizing, all of the hard work that people have been putting in for so long. And I'm seeing the benefits of it. I'm seeing the benefits of it in the elders that are here talking about our ways, talking about bringing those things back, talking about knowledge transfer. I see it in the kids that attended our medicine making workshops last weekend that are foster kids in care that their eyes just lit up being on the INTA and, not wanting to leave. And so these are the things that give me hope, and to see those future generations benefit from all of that.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think it's really indescribable the feeling when you see our little ones as young as, the first grade going around and, singing songs, leading feasts, doing all those protocols. They're the ones that are handing out the food, smudging the food. That's something I never got to experience, and I'm a young person myself. So to witness those things happening in our community, it's just something so profound and so beautiful. And you think to yourself, like, if we had all had this opportunity when we were their age, what would we look like today, considering, this beautiful work that we're in? Like, how much more advanced or how much better would it be with people like that in leadership? And it's coming. Like, it's coming, and before I know it, I'll be, you know, one of the older ones, and they'll be leading all these conversations. So it's really just exciting to witness that growth in our people in our community. And even to see leadership, sometimes it's a slow process and it's not happening everywhere like it should be. But I do see them taking and talking about the importance of youth voices. And I think there's more and more First Nations across Canada that, you're seeing young people as chiefs and leaders. And that's how it used to be. Like, there's stories about some of our, like, most influential chiefs and leaders being 27 years old when they held these positions, leading entire nations and confederacies. And so I think that in itself, witnessing these young people take up those leadership roles and leading their nations, uh it's an act of resurgence, and it's showing us that these teachings, this way of life that, was illegal for us at one point, it's coming back. And this is like such a pivotal time in the world, and it is difficult with a lot of the things that we're facing, but I just have all the faith in the world, and I really believe that there's a big shift that's happening right now, and that's coming very soon.
Well, and Tia and Sleydo and Jesse for those closing reflections. I know I'm going to be leaving here feeling really hopeful for our future and just excited about the work that is being done, and the work that you're all doing. So thank you. Um, as we come to the end of our time together, I just want to give a big thank you on behalf of ICA, Research for the Frontlines, and UVic, to Sleydo, Jesse, and Tia for sharing your time and knowledge with us. We'd also like to thank our friends at COCO for their ASL services, and for Jacob Crane for getting us started in a good way, and to all of you who attended and joined us in this important conversation. For those of you working in research, policy, philanthropy, I hope that today's conversation was an invitation for you to think carefully about your role in supporting the work that these folks are doing, and showing up in ways that strengthen and support the work that folks are already doing. So I hope that this conversation sparked new connections and possibilities for people here. And yeah, I just want to give another reminder that this is the first of 3 sessions of the Organizing Climate Future Speaker Series. So the second will be happening on August 13th on exploring Indigenous aesthetic practices as forms of climate research and political analysis. And this third session will be happening on October 15th and we will be talking about Indigenous governance and carbon economy. So I just wanted to give you that reminder. And with that, I just wanted to say take care, and we look forward to continuing these conversations with all of you in the future.